Today should be our first class after the new year and 591 Lab's first online session. Before we start, as usual, let's briefly introduce the course content, focusing on the DCN data center networking direction to give you an overview. Then I'll introduce myself. Some of you may know me and some may not. Initially, I was responsible for RS routing and switching at Huawei and Cisco CCIE-RS. Later, I started to handle the DCN direction, including tutoring for different versions of DCN and teaching. Currently, I hold 4 certifications, including the CCIE-RS and HCIE for routing and switching, as well as certifications in cloud computing and DCN. Previously, I also obtained a PMP certification. This is a brief introduction about me for those who may not know me well. In future classes, during the learning process, if you have any questions about this field, feel free to discuss them with me. These are my 4 certifications. Before continuing, let me share a bit about my learning journey, hoping it will be helpful to you all. Originally, I studied Huawei's RS. After completing the HCIE-RS, I joined 591 Lab Training Center. Here, I continued to study while taking exams in Huawei HCIE-RS and learning Cisco CCIE-RS direction. It was probably around September 2016 when I first took the written exam for RS. At that time, Huawei had interviews for RS, so I took the theory exam first. After the theory, because it was my first time and there was limited time, I went to the interview but didn't pass. After that, I took some time to pass the Cisco exam. After passing that, I immediately went for the Huawei's RS interview again and then obtained the RS certification. Then in 2017, I pursued cloud computing and obtained that certification. Then in 2018, I pursued the data center certification. At that time, the DC direction was quite unique, not like it is now. Back then, the DC path was positioned between cloud computing and routing and switching. What I mean is, the original DC direction included aspects of networking, specifically RS content. It also encompassed cloud computing content and some data communications. So this direction served as a transitional path between RS and cloud computing. But now, the DC path has evolved and differs from before. The current DC path is now more closely aligned with data communications and not as closely tied to cloud computing. We will cover this in more detail in our course later. Alright, we'll continue to look into this later. Now, about our class schedule, the timings are already set, right? Classes are every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 7 p.m. to 9:30 a.m. So everyone, please follow this schedule Monday to Thursday, 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Usually around 6 p.m. or so. How it works is I will send the link in the group. You need to stay updated with our group messages. That's about the content of our classes. The content will be an introduction to 9 major directions that we are going to discuss. It will go into specifics later. Regarding the materials needed before class, because many people often ask in the group, like, do we have the ENSP simulator? Do we have VirtualBox? Are the course materials and software available? These are our pre-class materials. Let me open and show them to you just a moment. This is our pre-class material. The first one is our courseware, which is for the data center networking. Inside, there are some additions that weren't there initially. I have added those as well. Part of it involves conducting experiments with OpenStack. During the classes, we will also cover the installation and setup of OpenStack, providing a complete environment for everyone to use. This is the OpenStack environment, the software we need, including the ENSP simulator. You will need to install whichever version you require. This is the installation source for Fusion Compute, versions 6.1 and 6.5. Actually, we are now at version 8.1, but the software hasn't been updated yet. I will upload it later. First, I should mention that our course covers Fusion Compute, but this part will not be on the exam. In our old data center environment, this was a significant part and a key focus. However, the current DCN direction is more network-oriented, and the cloud-related content is much simpler now. It's not included in the exams, but our course still covers it. I've also uploaded the software for this part. If you have time, you can continue with the experiments later. Although version 6.1 is fully installable, versions 6.5.1 and 8.1 are not due to compatibility with simulators like VBox or VMware Workstation. However, the operations are the same, and you can try out the software later. But this section, you can ignore it for now. Due to environmental issues, we cannot cover this part anymore in the course, as DCN doesn't focus on it and won't be examined. This is the old DC courseware. We have versions DC 1.0 and 2.0, including cloud computing materials. You can look through and study them, including various DCN documents and related cloud computing materials like FusionSphere and Huawei Cloud Stack. Ultimately, everyone should save these materials. In the future, if you need to directly access applications or further information, keep these course materials handy. Next, these are our class notes. During the lectures, I'll save all the key points in these notes, but you can also review them on your own. The courses are recorded normally from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m., 2.5 hours each session. However, some might not be able to attend in real time, so we provide recordings. After each class, I promptly upload the videos. I must mention that the success of these recordings isn't guaranteed 100% due to various factors. Sometimes the video might have no sound or fail to record properly. That's why I encourage everyone to attend the live classes if possible. In the live classes, you can ask questions at any time, which allows for immediate and detailed responses, especially during practical experiments. If there's a question that can't be clearly explained in a moment, I might dedicate additional time later, maybe a half hour or an hour, to discuss it specifically. It's important to actively ask questions and discuss during the class to avoid any confusion or lingering doubts. Don't leave any doubts unresolved, clear them up as we go to prevent confusion later on. Here, let me briefly mention Huawei's mission directions, which are IT infrastructure, basic software, and cloud services. This diagram should be familiar to everyone. Regarding Huawei's certification path, you might wonder about the next steps after completing the HCIE-DC. I often get asked what direction to take next. Let's see how many of you have already taken certifications in other areas like HCIE in Datacom, NP, security, or cloud computing. If you have type 1. This helps understand your background. CCNI is considered on par with Huawei's RS level. Once you've completed the Datacom direction, what should be your next focus? Looking at our current direction in DC, which falls under Datacom and is closely related to RS, your next steps could ideally involve related fields such as cloud computing. This helps in choosing a direction that complements what you've already studied. Cloud computing, security, and storage are closely related fields. In our DC data center direction, we often refer to it as data network, but also discuss aspects of cloud computing. However, the cloud technology we cover, specifically OpenStack, is different from Huawei's cloud services. We also talk about OpenStack. If you build upon your OpenStack knowledge by studying cloud computing further, it might make things clearer, right? This DC is related to networking. It inevitably involves security. And naturally, data centers require storage. Storage is not just about capacity, it involves a range of related technologies. After you complete the DC certification, you can consider pursuing these closely related areas as your next steps. This guidance is intended to help you plan your learning path. Some might wonder, can I start learning DC from scratch without any background in RS or Cisco security and cloud computing? Yes, you can, but with a precondition. If you have absolutely no background and don't even know what an IP address is, it becomes challenging to prepare you for an expert certification without some foundational knowledge. At the very least, you should understand the basics like configuring IP addresses, OSPF, and how BGP operates. These are fundamental networking concepts that are crucial for progressing in DC. You should be aware that there is a key topic in our DC courses called VXLAN, and this VXLAN technology is closely related to something we discussed, which is MPLS. Why? Because both are VPN technologies. So if we are to move forward and you want to learn about VXLAN or EVPN, then you must understand MPLS. Specifically, at the very least, you need to know what a VPN instance is, what root target means, and what root distinguisher is. These are the basics for anyone starting from scratch with our HCIE courses. This covers some of the basics. Please review this. This is our task prospectus diagram showing our direction, which, as previously mentioned, belongs to the Datacom direction. It's part of the Datacom domain now. It should be understood that some people may know about the history of DC and some may not. Initially, the DC direction was a separate track, parallel to Datacom and cloud computing. Over time, as it evolved, this direction was integrated into the Datacom sector. After the integration, initially the DC direction did not include RS, which is part of the Datacom directions RS. That's the main idea.